Yeah, I was about to say, good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing? Michael and Lily, y'all doing good? Yeah. So what the plan is, because we only have from 7 to 8, and because Aaron's with the kids, I promised him I would be done by 8 every night. So what we're doing is we're going to start at 7. Hopefully everybody, it's every first Wednesday of the month, and hopefully everybody can be here on time. And if for some reason you're running late, that's okay. You'll just have to catch up, because we do have to start at 7, just to make sure that we don't miss anything and leave anything out. So does anybody have any prayer requests real quick? Anybody? All right, let's pray. Lord, thank you for tonight. Thank you for every person who's here. Father, thank you for every family that's represented. Thank you for their desire for more of you and for growth in relationships. Lord, I ask you to please bless every person. Lord, grant us wisdom and authority over every situation in our lives, and we thank you for it in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so who here has had the chance to read any of the book yet? I had really prepared assuming you had not, so it's completely fine. Okay, good. Well, you probably know more than me about it then. But so we're going to go over the first 2 chapters kind of in general. I want to kind of prepare you so that way you know what we're looking forward to into the future, for future lessons. And also we're going to I prepared the love languages profile test for everybody. This is not like a pass-fail test. This is just for your information, because the only way that you're really going to get something out of this is to know what your love languages are. And then if you are in a relationship with someone else, it's going to behoove you to know what theirs are too, just for future growth and to kind of highlight the things we're learning. Okay, does that make sense? So if we have time, we may do these, here, not to like with each other, but here, so that way you'll know before you leave. If not, I do have them prepared and ready. I have a marriage one for people who are married. I have one for people who are single, who are not married yet. So it's going to be personal for you. So the first 2 chapters of the Love Languages book is kind of giving you an idea of the importance of knowing your love language. I will say, Aaron has never taken this class. He's never read this book, and he has probably heard more about love languages and love tanks than he ever wanted to hear. Because I took this class, I think I was about 18 when I took it, and that's probably top 5 things I ever heard in church that carried through for the rest of my life and future relationships. I will say I think that it impacted me in my marriage, it impacted me as a mother, and it even impacts me in friendships and with the people that I work with. So it is very important. So this is something that I think you can learn from married, not married, relationship, not relationship, okay? So the one thing we do have to remember is that every one of us in here speaks different love languages, right? You're going to have usually a primary love language. So it's kind of like, most of us in here, our first language was English, right? But depending on what part of the country you're from, your dialect might be a little bit different, right? I think we kind of covered that on Sunday morning. There's certain things that Aaron says differently than I say, just because of where we were raised and how we were raised. So every person speaks a different love language. And even if you have the same primary love language as somebody else, your dialect, the way you process things might be a little bit different. So the best way to understand this is, like, if I speak English, that's my primary speaking language. If Hannah's primary speaking language is Chinese, could you imagine? But if it was, and I'm literally trying to talk to her, I'm trying to communicate to her, and the more we're trying to talk back and forth, neither one of us speak the same language. We're both getting frustrated because we don't understand what the other person is saying. We're putting in effort. We're trying to communicate with each other, but because we're speaking a different language, we don't understand, right? That's about the same way that it is emotionally in your love language. So in any relationship that you're in, You have to know what your love language is, and you have to know what the other person's love language is. Not that every person you ever communicate with, here, take this test so I know what your love language is. But usually, if you know what they are, these 5 love languages, and you kind of understand how each one carries and presents itself, then you'll kind of have a feel for that. I know what my kids' love languages are. They've never taken this test, but I know what they are. And so I communicate to Hannah differently, and I communicate to Stephen differently so that they both feel loved. I think that every probably parent in here, like you parent differently for each child, and that's the reason why. So communication, like we said, because love languages are different, it can be limited if you don't speak the language of the person who you're trying to communicate with. And if you wish to communicate with someone in a real way, if you want to connect with them kind of more than just surface deep, you need to learn their language. And we're not just talking about just a husband and wife. We're talking about a parent and a child. We're talking about within friendships, at work. If you want to have any true connection, you need to communicate to them in a way that they will understand. So just imagine, I feel like, so my love languages are words of affirmation and quality time, right? So if you tell me I'm amazing, I will feel so loved. And if you tell me that I'm horrible and I did a horrible job at work, I will feel like you just slapped me up one down way in the other. But if you were to give me a gift, that's great. Thank you so much. But a note to me means more than a gift because my love language are words of affirmation, right? So sometimes you know what your love language is, maybe not because someone communicated it well to you, but you can see what hurts you the most. You know, the things that if someone speaks harshly to you, it feels like that, right? If someone were to slap you, it's like doesn't faze you at all because your love language isn't physical touch. I mean, it's just certain things. Now, if someone slapped me, my love language isn't physical touch, but I probably would be upset. But I mean, it's just certain things like that. You have to understand what affects you the most, and that will be a good indicator. So effort is not just enough. And Aaron told me I had to read some scriptures just to make, since we are in church with this class. So in 1 John 4:16, it says, "We know how much God loves us, and we've put our trust in his love. God is love, and all who live in love live in God, and God lives in them." So any relationship, it's important to learn to love, right? When we learn to love, we're acting like the Father. We're becoming like him. And so that's what makes it worth it. In John 13:34-35, it says, "So now I'm giving you a new commandment. Love each other. Just as I have loved you, you should love each other. Your love for one another will prove to the world that you are my disciples." So that's just another indicator to the world of who we belong to when we love them effectively, right? It's very important. And so, oh, sorry guys. I'm going to read what I have highlighted here. It says, "The problem with this is that we have overlooked one fundamental truth. People speak different languages. And so we need to learn the language that other people speak." So have you ever, I can speak to the married people in here, have you ever felt like you were loving your spouse? Like you were really putting in effort. And their response was like, you know, it was like, That could have very well been because you were speaking in your love language to your spouse, but it wasn't theirs. So their response was not necessarily what it would have been if you had been speaking in their love language. Being sincere is not enough. We have to be willing to speak in the love language that that person understands. So every person in here, if you can imagine, does everybody in here drive? Or you've driven? You have a car, you have a vehicle, right? What happens if that gas tank is on empty? It dies. It doesn't work anymore. It doesn't function. Every person in here has a love tank. And I'm telling you, like, I know this sounds cheesy for every guy in here. If you don't speak in the love language of the person that you are building a relationship with, whoever that is, and you're not filling their love tank, then that relationship engine will be running on empty. That's when relationships don't survive. That's when relationships don't work. So what are the 5 love languages? Does anybody know any of these? Does anybody know? There's 5. Has anybody heard? Hannah? Okay, that's one. Words of affirmation. Acts of service, that's another one. Quality time. Gifts and Michael, good job. Physical touch. I don't know if I need to be nervous about that. Oh, man. So we know what the 5 love languages are, right? 5 love. Every single person, one of these is going to be their primary, and another one is going to be their secondary, right? Every person in here. And that even starts as a child. Like, if you have a child, you know that there's a certain way. Like Michelle, you speak to Sarah differently than you do Roger because you know that they're 2 very different people. They have 2 different love tanks, right? Okay, so words of affirmation. Mark Twain said, I can live for 2 months on a good compliment. It's a pretty good idea. That was his primary love language. Verbal appreciation speaks powerfully to persons whose primary love language is affirmation. Simple statements like, you look great in that, or you must be the best baker in the whole world. I love what you cook. Those are sometimes all a person needs to hear to feel loved. And another way to speak affirmation is through encouragement. So I will say, regardless of who you're talking to, if you think something encouraging about someone, please tell them. It can make all the difference in the world. Second one, quality time. Quality time is more than just proximity. So if I'm in the room with Hannah, and if her love language is quality time, then we can be sitting in the same room, but if we're both on our phones, or she's watching something on her iPad or her whatever, and I'm watching something or I'm working, we're not really spending quality time, right? Quality time is when you take the time to focus on that person, and that's who you're spending the time with, whether that be someone you work with, a friend, a spouse, a child, someone you're dating. That is quality time. Receiving gifts. Some people respond really well to gifts. That's just, I think my son he loves gifts. That's one of his love languages. And if you speak this language, then you're going to treasure whatever little thing a person gives you. I mean, it could be something small. Like I think one time he gave Aaron it was like an eagle pendant or something, and it was like cheap, turn your skin different colors kind of cheap, but he was so proud of it, and he gave him that gift because that was his love language, so he wanted to show his dad how much he loved him by getting him that little thing. So it doesn't have to be something opulent or expensive if your love languages are receiving gifts, right? The other one, acts of service. So if you are a person who your love language is acts of service, and I think my mother-in-law, I think Kat, she's an acts of service person. If she's out there and she is pulling weeds or she's raking pine straw, whatever, if you go out there and help her, she feels loved, son. That is her love language. So oftentimes, acts of service, it's like what Jesus did in washing the disciples' feet. Right? That was an act of service, something that you can't tell me he really wanted to do, but he wanted his disciples to feel loved. And then physical touch, I'm giving you a hug. I'm holding your hand. And sometimes, like Aaron's is physical touch. So like we'll be watching TV and literally he'll go like this. Like he just puts his arm over. And I know he wants me to scratch his arm. And literally, he will fall asleep with me scratching his arm. If you were to do that to me, I would feel like my skin is coming off. Like, you can't rub the same part on me for more than probably about 5 seconds. And I'm like, oh, stop. That's giving me the heebies. But he'll, same spot, just scratch his arm, and he's fine. So everybody has a different love language, right? So it's important to love someone in what their love language is. So some of the questions you would ask yourself. What makes me feel the most loved? So just think about that. What's the last thing that someone did for you or said to you or whatever that you felt loved? I think that would be a good indicator. Give you guys a second to think. Just think. All right. And if you have a hard time thinking about that, what that last instance was, what is something that you request the most often from the people that you love in your life? What do you request the most often? If it's for help to do this, then maybe one of your love languages is acts of service. If it's, babe, tell me something sweet. Tell me something nice. And then, that's like Aaron's famous thing. I'm like, babe, tell me something sweet. He's like, you're so sweet. I'm like, you suck. But I mean, it's like you just think about like what do you ask for the most often, and then how do you express love to people? Just think about that. What's kind of your go-to? Because some of those are good indicators as to what your primary love language is. So I want to go ahead and y'all go ahead and take these tests, okay? And then I want to talk about them. So I'm going to have Hannah help me. Each couple of the questions, it's which one would you respond the most to, okay? You may respond to each one, but which one, if someone were to love you in this way, that you would feel the most loved by, okay? So it's like, which one best describes you kind of question. Monty, you don't have one. You need one. All right, so did everybody finish it? Did everybody finish theirs? Is anybody surprised by your results? Is anybody surprised, or is it what you anticipated? Okay, did anybody score really, really high in something and really, really low in something? High is like the dominating number. I don't even know how many. So like there's 30 questions. So if you score 15 or more in one thing. I did. Okay, yeah. How many? What was your highest in something? 11. In what? Would have pegged it. So this is really good information for you to know, okay? Is there anybody in here who you've never heard anything about love languages ever? Like you've never really talked about it, you've never really, this is a brand new topic for you. So this is very important because as we go through the chapters coming up, you're going to want to kind of focus in on what you scored high in, right? And then the things that you scored low in, that doesn't mean we're off the hook, right? Because very well, there may be someone that we're in relationship with or we will be in relationship with who they score really high in something that we score very low in. But that doesn't mean that we aren't to communicate to them in the way that they communicate the most effectively, right? That is the answer for connection. When Aaron and I first got married, my kids were both very small. And all they wanted to do was be up on me when I was sleeping, when I was awake. No matter what, they wanted to be there. When I used the restroom, they stuck their little fingers under the door of the bathroom just so that I knew they were there. That's how they wanted to be right with me. So even though my love language was not physical touch, I had to learn that if I did not love them in the way they were looking for, they would feel rejection, right? So that's very important in any connection that you have with anyone, to recognize the things that they feel the most love in so you can communicate with them effectively. Because the beautiful thing about love, and that's one of the things that parenting taught me, love is a choice. Love doesn't just happen. Like, I know that people say, especially like when you have a child, that, as soon as they're born, you just feel washed in this feeling of love. I never experienced that, but I did experience the all-encompassing love that happens when you choose to love someone, right? And that's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about the love that just comes naturally, just easy, every second of every day. We're talking about the love that comes with a choice, right? And every person is made and created with the desire to be loved because that person is choosing to love them. And what kind of a lay down your life kind of love is it to love a person not in the way that comes naturally to you, but in a way that comes naturally to them, right? So that's what we're learning in this class, is how to recognize a love language, recognize what ours is, and recognize it in other people. So as a spouse, as a parent, as a friend, as a son, a daughter, a grandchild, as a leader, we learn to communicate the way that other people will feel the most loved and appreciated and treasured, right? That's the point of this lesson. So does anybody have any questions about anything so far? The primary thing was really just to kind of tell you guys what we're going to be doing and then to take the test. And so we've done really good on time. So does anybody think of anything else? Any other questions you have? Yeah, is there any story that you have where is there any story that you have that you felt really loved when someone did this for you? Or you felt like you should have felt more loved than you did, but you really didn't? Anybody? Well, that happened to me twice. That happened to me when Aaron and I were first married. So Aaron I think, and there's a reason that he thought this because, I do like stuff, I will say. I do like to buy stuff, but I don't necessarily like for other people to buy stuff for me. I like to buy it for myself because then I know I get what I want, I'd rather them write me letters. But Aaron, when we first got married, he was like, oh, she never wears a jacket. Oh, she really, she deserves a really nice jacket. Actually, we were dating, I think. He bought me this brown leather jacket. And it was ugly. It was so ugly. But he thought that it was the best gift ever. And then the next Christmas, I think, which he told me, he gave me permission to tell this, so I'm not just trashing him. But he bought me a keyboard, which was sweet, right? Because I had said something, I don't even remember when, about wanting to kind of pick up playing again. I think we gave that away, didn't we? We gave it away. So Aaron told me, he said, babe, I learned early that I needed to start actually listening to what you said you want instead of what I thought you wanted. So he really looked for me to feel loved, and I really just felt like, oh, that's sweet. Can I return it? Where's the receipt? Has anybody ever felt that way about anything they've ever gotten bought or done for? No? So how do you feel the most loved? Words of affirmation. And so that's the thing, is that if your love language is like words of affirmation, that means that words can make you feel the most empowered, and words can also make you feel the most like isolated or abandoned, depending on how that's spoken to you, right? Who in here, your primary love language is words of affirmation? Mine is 100%. And quality time. Yep. So that's the thing, is that you are going to want to instinctively love people in your love language. It's just the way it is. But sometimes it doesn't work that way. Like I said, Aaron doesn't necessarily thrive on words of affirmation. That doesn't really float him one way or the other. But if you spend time with him, and if you scratch maybe not if you scratch his arm, but if one scratches his arm, he just feels like a king. And that's just the way it is. So you have to find how to love people, not in what's natural to you, but what's natural to them. Anybody else have a sharing moment? Something that worked for you, didn't work for you? Or you did it for someone else, and it didn't come across the way. Brian, has that ever happened to you?
Yeah, I used to buy her gifts that were practical, stuff I thought I needed.
Yeah. Nonsensical thing. Yeah. And have the results been better since then? So, that's the thing, is that it is the most frustrating thing to think, my gosh, I am loving them in the best way I know how. I am trying so hard, but they don't seem to feel that I love them. They don't seem to understand what I'm trying to say. It's not because you're not putting in the effort. It's because you're speaking the wrong language. And it sounds like it's hard, because it can be. It can be hard to speak a different language. Do you think that every time I watch a TV show, I want to go like this? Most of the time, no. Most of the time, I don't. But I'm just like, I'm playing Disney Emoji Blitz. Like this, watching TV. But I do that on purpose, because I know that means something to him. And the beautiful thing about whenever someone else feels loved, because they feel loved, they want to speak your language too. They want you to feel loved also. It's just a mutually beneficial thing. And so that's what I kind of just want to reiterate to you guys. And so what we're going to be going over is the first Wednesday of every month. And we will be live streaming. I didn't know we were live streaming. But we're going to go over words of affirmation next. So just because you may or may not have tested low in that does not mean that you don't need to pay attention to it. Because, I mean, I cannot stress enough, this is not just for marriage relationships. This is for every relationship that you are a part of, that you want to connect with. I mean, and you can usually tell, like, there's certain people, like mine is words of affirmation. And so I have no problem at all shooting a text message to someone or telling them something, that I feel encouraging, to them or whatever. Some people, I can tell it, like, lights something up on the inside of them. And some people are like, thanks. No big deal, thanks. And that's great because that's not necessarily their love language, right? It's something else. So you just have to know what to look for in your everyday interaction. So we are going to be going over words of affirmation in the next Wednesday, the next first Wednesday of the month. So what I want you guys to do, if you haven't gotten a book, get a book. And I want you, if you can, to read the first couple chapters because it explains better what I've tried to say the last 30 minutes. Just read that. And then the first chapter, the words of affirmation, as it kind of gets into that part, because that's what we're going to be going over. So I'm going to be highlighting some points that I see in the chapter. And then if there's any questions or anything that it kind of highlights to you, make a note for that, because I think that we have ample time and we're a small enough group that we can do that and answer questions. I mean, I was prepared for 50, but this is a good, healthy group right here. So I want you to kind of, over the next month, look for some interactions, like kind of pay attention to your relationships. The pocket of people who you seem to interact the most with that mean the most to you, and kind of look for, maybe kind of do some experiments, right? See if you say something kind to them or encouraging to them, what they do with that. Or maybe like buy them a little something or write them a little note or make it a point to like, hey, let's go to lunch or whatever. See what that does for that person. And then it's going to start making you a little bit more aware of looking for people's primary love language. Okay, can everybody do that? We have a month. So let's just kind of experiment with the people who are in our pocket of people, so that way we can kind of recognize love languages, because we need to kind of get used to doing that, kind of stretching it out, right? I tried to learn Spanish because, Stephen married Angelise, and I didn't do that great. I need to start again. I mean, but it's kind of like that. You're learning to speak a new language, right? You're learning to recognize new things, even if it's, new words, a little bit at a time. You have anything to share? Oh, man. Yeah. That's true. It does depend on the person. Yeah. And it's really good to be insightful like that, because the whole point to all of this is to be introspective, so that way we don't sit in this puddle of frustration trying to figure out why our relationships don't seem to be working, right? Those around us. Huh? Yes, that's a great word. Every relationship we're in, we do need to be intentional. And it does feel like a lot of work, but anything that's worth having usually is, right? So, I mean, that's an incredible point, because I agree with you. Like, I work with 100 real estate agents, right? I don't want them coming up and hugging me all the time. There's a few of them that I'm comfortable with hugging me, but I don't want random people to just come up and touch me all the time. Or at nighttime, after work, I want to spend time with the family, not necessarily be going, so in quality time is my love language. So I do think that it does change according to relationship, right? So I think that in anything that we do, we can always spread ourselves too thin, right? You can always overthink everything. That's just true. But we do want to be deliberate and intentional, especially in that core, right? Our family, our close friends, the people who we really do life with, and then do that well, right? We do those relationships well. And then once we do those relationships well, then we can start kind of seeing how that kind of orbits out, right? That becomes that ripple that goes outward. But it'll never start anywhere if we don't know what we're looking for, right? I mean, Michael's exactly right. It doesn't matter how beautiful our car is. It doesn't matter how luxury it is, what it can do. If it's on empty, it's not going to be good for anything. Yeah, except, I mean, you can sleep in it. I mean, that's the thing. We have relationships that are shells of what they could be, right? I mean, they are functioning as a relationship, but they are not as fulfilling as they could be. And the important thing is that when our love tank is on full, when our tank is not on empty, we are full. We are fully functioning. We are firing on all cylinders. That's all I know about cars. I don't have anything else. But that's whenever we are really going to hit our best potential. Because there's no way that, like for me at work, I am going to be able to go out and do all of the things, accomplish all the goals when I go at home and it's a battlefield because Aaron and I can't communicate. Or I don't know how to love my children well. There's no way I'm going to be as successful as I could be out there if I'm not successful here, right? So it's important. We have to be deliberate, we have to be intentional, and we have to recognize the languages for what they are, okay? And then also, to Rebecca's point, recognize the different scenarios we're in, the different relationships that we can have, because there's no way that it would be appropriate to, if your love language is physical touch, for you to go out and hug every woman you see, right? That wouldn't be. Probably. Yeah, and it's kind of like, and so that's the thing, is that we're not talking about love without boundaries. We are talking about being able to recognize in a healthy way, right? A healthy environment with the boundaries that real love requires. But really what I would like for us to focus on from now until March, blah, 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 the first Wednesday of that month, be intentional in the pocket of relationships that you have, okay? Really delve into what your love language is in whatever the scene is, that it is appropriate, right? Church Heather, work Heather, family Heather, and then kind of just get used to speaking those languages. Okay? Is that good? And I want you guys, like I said, to read those first few chapters. If you don't have a book, we have some out there out front. And I'm telling you guys, like I was nervous about teaching the class, not because I'm nervous about talking, but because I just want this to be as effective as possible, because this is one of the main things that I remember ever learning in my whole life, college, church, all that, because this has helped me the most in relationships. And we were built for relationships. I mean, God made us that way for a reason. He made us for this, with this inner need to be loved. And so we just need to learn well, because if we don't know how to love those closest to us, then we are not going to be effective in loving the world. It's just not going to happen. It won't be true and it won't be genuine. We have to be able to have our love tanks filled so that way when we go out to the world, we can show them what real love looks like. So does anybody else have anything? Mm-hmm. Right. That's true. Even sign language is communication. I mean, it's all about communication. So, I mean, this test was difficult because, I mean, that's the thing. I made Aaron take it, and it was like 10:30 at night. And he was like, oh my gosh, are you serious? And he said, babe, that's a hard question. Babe, that's a hard question. I don't know how to answer that question, because it's just a hard test. But if we don't be real about what we need, then we won't be able to recognize it in other people. And communication, like Michelle said, it's huge. We have to learn how to communicate. And I know that it can seem wah-wah, especially especially women tend to want to communicate more than men for the most part. I feel like that's just kind of what I've seen in gender, depending on situation, for the most part. But everybody's communicating, even if it's not with words. So communication is king in relationships. No, we're ahead of time. Uh huh.
How do you communicate you need more of your love language to Aaron without it feeling like you're telling him he's only doing it because you just told him to do it?
Yeah. Well, it did say, and when I was reading the chapter, that it can feel or even seem like to the other person that you are nagging them because they feel like they are loving you to their capacity, but they're loving you in their love language and not necessarily in yours. So, honestly, I will say, Aaron and he's grown in this very well, because whenever your love language isn't affirmation and you're married to someone like me who, I mean, I'm not going to say I'm high maintenance, but I do like affirmation. And it can be hard, you know what I mean? Because he's like, babe, I told you I loved you this morning. And I'm like, so, like, it's nighttime. I need to hear it, you know, certain things like that. I mean, so I do think that it is not, it's going to take a lot of action on the other person's part in whatever the relationship is to genuinely hear what you're saying, because that's the thing, is that in any real relationship, there's a degree of correction, right? There's a degree of instruction. And if you tell the person that you love in whatever relationship is, I'm not feeling loved because of this, if you say it in a respectful manner, it is their choice to receive that correction or guidance. And if they don't, then that could affect the effectiveness of the relationship.
It's informational.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, even when you go on your first date, you're saying, so what do you like to do? And then it's information you're receiving so that you can better love. And after you spend time with someone for a while, you're going to receive more information and you'll understand better how to love them.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's one of the reasons why I feel like it's important for people to do this together, especially if they're in a relationship, because it helps the other person understand why you are asking for these things, you know, and it's important. Like, if you are in a relationship, or even if you're not, and when you are, you need to tell that person, this is my love language. This is how I feel the most loved with this thing. And if you want for us to have a relationship that's as good as it could be, I need for you to be deliberate and intentional about loving me in this way, because it can feel taxing. Like if you're tired and you're exhausted at the end of the day, and your spouse's love language is words of affirmation or quality time, and all you want to do is go to sleep, I mean, honestly, truth, then it is very hard to push past that, to love that person. And I'm not going to say 100% of the time you do. You know, sometimes you're just like, I'm tired, I'm going to sleep. Bye. There have been sometimes I've been so tired that literally just the sound of Aaron's voice actually has put me to sleep. And I'm like, oh, babe, I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that. Like, were you talking to me? I asked him the next morning, what were you saying? But it's just has to be a deliberate act on your part to listen to what the person is saying to you in relationship, and then to love them in the way that's effective to them. I mean, because if my love language is words of affirmation and Aaron's is physical touch, if he never says anything sweet to me, I don't want to scratch his arm, right? Hey, we listening back there? I mean, so that's just the truth of the matter. If yours is quality time and mine is words of affirmation, if you don't say anything sweet to me, I don't want to spend time with you. I mean, it's just, it's a mutually beneficial thing. So I think as you feel loved, that person will feel the wonderful effects of you feeling loved, and they'll feel loved and want to, like, it's like this bounce back action type deal. Mm-hmm. We're a work in progress. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You're teaching each other. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'll walk up to him and say, "Do you think I'm pretty? Do you love me?" And he just starts giggling and just kind of grinning. But
And that is one of the indicators. It says, what do you ask for the most? Like, do you ask, hey, I want a date night. Hey, can you buy me this? Yeah. Because she needs it to be full, Monty. She needs her love tank full. So these, and honestly, I do think that if you are in a safe environment where you feel heard, you will feel more comfortable telling someone what you need, right? Or what you're looking for. If you repeatedly don't get what you're asking for, you will stop asking, usually. So as long as your spouse or the person you're in a relationship with is communicating to you what they want, that's a good sign. That's because they feel like you can still give them what they want. If they stop asking and you start feeling that connection kind of get lost, that's a pretty good indicator. Because one of the things that I wrote, and then this is, because this was in Proverbs, and this can be a dangerous space to be in. It says, it's in Proverbs 27:7, to a hungry soul, every bitter thing is sweet. And to me, that means if you're hungry and you are running on empty, you're going to look for what you need in places that you may not necessarily should looking at.
And that's where I wanted to put it. Sometimes you don't want to talk about it at all. You want to bring it to God.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes you might be just causing something in between in that relationship that only God can work it out.
Mm-hmm. And that's true. Because there are certain situations when we find ourselves in it that we've done everything we can do. And in every relationship, it works two ways. It's two people. My mama always told me, you can never force someone to do their part in a relationship. All you can do is your part. And then if there's still something there, then it's up to the Lord to do his work. But you cannot expect something from somebody that you haven't communicated your need to them. You can't that's the thing. Nobody in here now can say they've never heard about this, right? You've now become responsible for your part. And because you're here, that means you want to have relationships that are thriving now in the future. But I mean, let that proverb be assigned to you. If you are in a married relationship, if your spouse is communicating to you their need and you're not within reason, I'm not saying, craziness, but within reason, and you're not giving it to them and they start running on empty, they're going to look for fulfillment in something else. So, I mean, that's just something, and all of us we'll all look for it somewhere else. And really, our ultimate love source without any kind of failure or impediment is with the Lord. Always, always, always. We cannot expect something from someone in any relationship that's filling what only he can give. So has to be number one, has to, because if not, we're going to have such ridiculous expectation over our human relationships that everybody feels sometimes. So that needs to be in priority. And then after that, we need to do our part to communicate, but communicate effectively. Okay? Make sense? 8:00. The Lord bless you and keep you. Amen.